Welcome to Haunted FM, where the shadows speak and the silence screams. Tonight, we bring you a terrifying, true account that will haunt your thoughts long after the lights go out. This isn't fiction. This happened. A girl vanishes from her locked room in the dead of night, but her screams, they never stopped echoing through the walls. Turn off the lights, plug in your headphones, because this is the story of she vanished from her room. But her screams never stopped. The old colonial duplex had been built in 1796. It was one of those houses that always looked like it was about to fall apart, but somehow never did. The peeling paint and crooked window frames were its most harmless features, though. Beneath the surface, it was alive. It waited patiently in the shadows for someone lonely to move in, someone desperate for companionship, and when they did, it offered them a twisted bargain. In exchange for their sanity, it would give them a friend. That's what happened to Sarah, who moved into the house. To escape her ex, she'd left everything behind to start over in the small town of Ashfield, Vermont, and it was here she met her neighbor, Emily. The two women couldn't have been more different. While Sarah was quiet and reserved, Emily was loud and friendly. She never seemed to run out of stories, especially about the men in her life. She was always falling in love and out of love. She was dramatic, passionate, intense. Sarah enjoyed hearing her stories, though for the first time since her breakup, she felt a sense of community. Then, without warning, Emily vanished. One minute she was there talking about her new boyfriend, the next she was gone. The police said it was an open case, that they were still looking for her, but Sarah knew better. No one had seen Emily. In the last 3 months, it wasn't like her to go anywhere without telling Sarah. She hadn't packed any bags. Her car was still in the driveway. No force on earth could make her disappear like that. Sarah was just beginning to calm down when the screaming started. It was a piercing scream that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at the same time. At first it woke her up in the middle of the night, but later it found her in her waking hours. Then one night at 3:12 a.m., while Sarah was awoken by the sound of Emily's tormented scream, she decided she couldn't take it anymore. She put on her coat and walked across the street to Emily's house. As she reached out to knock on the door, she noticed something strange. The deadbolt was unlocked, which was odd because Emily was so paranoid she triple-locked her door at night. But something inside the house was calling to Sarah, so she pushed the door open and walked in. Inside, the house was dark and silent. There was no sign of Emily, but Sarah could feel her presence in the room with her. Suddenly, Sarah's flashlight beam landed on something in the corner of the room. It was Emily's sketchbook, which was lying open to a drawing of Sarah and Emily standing in the living room. But the picture didn't look right. It was filled with scribbles and scratches, and then there was the shadow in the corner. It was a tall, thin figure that seemed to be draining away into the wall, but it was impossible to make out any details. Sarah quickly turned off the flashlight, assuming it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. She went to check on Emily, but her neighbor wasn't in her bedroom. The window was wide open and the curtains were blowing wildly in the wind, even though the windows were closed. As Sarah searched the rest of the house, she began to feel like she was being watched, like something in the house was carefully observing her every move. She eventually found Emily's phone on the kitchen table and brought it with her when she went home. When the sun came up, Sarah called the police. They took her statement and promised to keep searching for Emily, but nothing ever came of it. Over the following weeks, Sarah became convinced that the house itself was responsible for her friend's disappearance. She spent her days cleaning out the attic and selling the furniture, preparing to move out. But before she could leave, the nightly screaming began again. Every night, at exactly 3:12 a.m., she would hear Emily's blood-curdling scream echo through the house. No matter how many times Sarah tried, she couldn't get through to her neighbor's house. It sounded like whatever was inside the house was deliberately hiding itself from the world. Then one night, while Sarah was reading in bed, the lights suddenly went out. A gust of wind rattled the window panes and a chill swept through the room. The hair on the back of Sarah's neck stood on end. Then she heard the front door open and footsteps approaching her room. As she hid under the covers, she could hear the doorknob turning. The door creaked open and a voice whispered her name. It was Emily's voice, but it sounded strained and distant, like it was coming from far away. Sarah wanted to answer, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. What if it wasn't Emily? What if it was something else entirely? Finally, the voice grew louder. Emily stepped into the room and collapsed onto the bed. It really was her friend, but her eyes were blank and soulless, like they had turned to ash. Emily's lips moved as if she was about to say something, but no sound came out. Sarah was startled by her appearance. She looked like a zombie, drained of all life and emotion. But then Emily began to cry, and her tears splashed onto Sarah's face. "Help me!" she cried. "I don't want to be here," Emily begged and pleaded. But she never explained what was happening or why she needed Sarah's help. Sarah was desperate to help, but she didn't know how. So she simply held her friend's hand and waited for her to explain, but Emily never did. Instead, she suddenly sat up and screamed at Sarah, "Don't trust this house. It's not safe. You have to leave while you still can." Sarah was frightened by her outburst, but she was determined to stay until she got to the bottom of what was happening. But Emily warned her, "It's too late for me, but it's not too late for you. Please leave." With that, she threw herself off the bed and raced toward the window. Sarah ran after her, but Emily disappeared into the night. She never returned. Sarah tried calling her, but the line was disconnected. She could still hear the nightly screams. Every night at 3:12 a.m., they echoed through the house, reminding Sarah of her missing friend. One day, Sarah's landlord stopped by to collect the rent. When he learned she'd been having problems, he told her that Emily had been evicted for failing to pay her rent. He'd given her until spring to move out, but apparently she'd gotten spooked and left early. "That place can be creepy at night," he said, his eyes darting around the room nervously. "You're sure you're okay living there by yourself?" Sarah nodded, even though she wasn't convinced the house was at fault. Later that night, the screaming began again. Sarah was sitting in her room trying to draw the shadow figure she'd seen in Emily's sketchbook when the room suddenly began to shake. She could hear Emily scream in the next room, and it sounded closer than ever before. Then suddenly, the closet door opened and black sludge oozed out. It slithered onto the floor and spread across the room, forming a large puddle. Sarah backed away, watching in horror as it slowly consumed the room. The closet door creaked open further and the room began to change. It was becoming more and more like Emily's, but at the same time, it was also becoming less real, like it was slipping away into another dimension. Then Sarah saw Emily standing in the doorway. She was beckoning to Sarah, inviting her to join her in the other room. But Sarah hesitated. Something about the house made her uneasy. Then Emily began to scream and the closet door slammed shut. When Sarah ran to the closet, she realized it was empty. The sludge was gone, too, and when she flipped on the light, she saw that the room was exactly as she'd left it. Nothing had changed. Yet Sarah knew what she'd seen was real. She watched in horror as Emily was trapped in a terrifying supernatural loop, doomed to wander the halls of the house forever, screaming for help that would never come. And then the faceless shadow entity appeared. It was in the corner of the room, waiting patiently for someone lonely to come home. Sarah desperately wanted to help Emily, but she knew she couldn't stay in the house. So she packed her things and fled. She never looked back. As she drove away, she could still hear Emily's screams echoing behind her. The house had taken another victim, but Sarah knew it wouldn't rest until it claimed more. She eventually found the cassette tape in her things. It was labeled Emily, Final Night, and when she played it, she could hear Emily talking about how she'd found a friend in the house, a friend who understood her pain and loneliness. And then she heard the scratching sounds as Emily's friend began to consume her. Every night, Sarah still hears the screams. Every night at 3:12 a.m., the lonely house reaches out and claims another victim. Now it's up to you to help Sarah escape the clutches of the house. Click the video on screen now to reveal what happens next, and be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode.